Hey guys, welcome back to today's video. Today is Sunday, January 16th, 2022, and today we are going to be talking about the United States Senate elections, specifically focused on how the Republican Party can reach a high majority in the United States Senate following these midterm elections that are expected to be good for the GOP and provide them with some advancements in the United States Senate, leading to the Senate majority. But the Senate majority isn't the most the GOP could get. Obviously, that is something that is attainable, considering that they only need one United States Senate seat in order to do it. Taking a look at the last election, in the Georgia runoff elections, it provided the Democratic Party the 2 seats needed in order to win. After the 2020 Senate elections, the Democrats were stuck at a majority here where the GOP was able to win 50 seats and the Democrats won 48. Both of the Georgia races went to a runoff, and as I just showed you, the Democrats won them both. But this majority by no means was large, and the GOP has an ample opportunity to pick them up or a singular race in order to win back control of the U.S. Senate. But the GOP, I would say, definitely has opportunities and a circumstance where they could receive the largest majority possible under this Senate map. The good news for the Democratic Party is that this map doesn't contain many toss-up seats. The Democrats are really only playing defense on 4 regions of the 4 states across 2 different regions in the United States, and it really puts them in a position where they don't have to do as much work as they did in the 2020 election or 2018 in terms of expansiveness. They do, of course, have to do a very similar amount of work to defend seats in what is expected to be a red wave year, with a year in which Joe Biden is immensely unpopular and the generic ballot has flipped on the Democrats for the first time since 2016. The Democrats, of course, are going to be backs against the wall, trying to ensure that they can win every single race possible and minimize their losses. But this prediction is going to be not necessarily, any type of binding prediction, more so if our national environment was much more in favor of the GOP. We're talking numbers from 2014 or even as bad for the Democrats as 2010 on the national average, combined with Joe Biden remaining so unpopular, potentially even worse, what that could bring in terms of a Republican victory across the country. And we can start out by characterizing all of the safe states from our previous prediction. And the reason why we aren't going to be spending much time on these safe states is because these are states that we already know how they are going to go. The GOP is in a position where if they are getting the largest majority possible, every seat that is already expected to be safe, of course, has to be safe as well, because it's expanding on what they previously had. In addition to this, you would expect the resurgence of states such as Ohio back into the safe column as it was in the 2016 Senate election results when Rob Portman defeated the former governor by over 20 percentage points across the state. So that would return Ohio back to the safe red characterization. And that would give the GOP straight off the bat 46 safe red seats that are not up for re-election or seats that just simply aren't going to be competitive. And they won't be competitive because this circumstance that we are in gives the GOP such a large advantage, simply based off the fact that this is our red wave type of scenario. But beyond a red wave, more so like a red tsunami as high as the Empire State Building, right? So that's what we are talking about here and why we start off with such a significant amount of safe Republican seats. Now, of course, the margins are going to change. That's why I've moved over the state of Ohio from where it was previously. This is not some type of simple flip. I mean, the GOP would be having to have substantial victories across some of these states, and margins just really make things a lot more interesting. Now, taking a look at our Senate map here, what would happen is a lot of these safe Democratic seats would cease being safe Democratic seats. They wouldn't become essentially possible for Republican Party pickups simply based off the fact that they are still Democratic-leaning seats, Democratic advantage seats in 99.99% of circumstances, with very extreme scenarios being considered, and this is not a 0.01% chance, more so something that could be a resemblance of a 2010-2014 type wave year on the national average. In 2010 and 2014, a Republican victory on the national average did not result in as many victories as it would today, simply because the popular vote then was still winnable for the GOP. Not to say it's entirely unwinnable, but Democrats definitely have an inherent advantage when it comes down to the popular vote because of their population centers across the country. So if Republicans are up 10 points in the national average, it means a lot more now than it did in 2010. There's a big difference between the 12 years. But the point is that some of these solid Democratic seats will still go to the Democratic Party, but won't be as solid for Democrats. For instance, while California and Hawaii might remain safe blue, I could expect Oregon or Washington to narrow down into the likely column. Not to say that they are going to be, winnable by the GOP by any metric, just that the states themselves are no longer voting for Democrats by 15 points plus for a bunch of reasons. And it does add up based off of the map that we are in today. Now, looking at the remaining states, you could probably guess how many of them are going to go. Anyone can tell me how Vermont is going to go or Connecticut, but for some of these swing states, the margins really matter. And the GOP, I would say, and this is actually a good thing for the Democrats, the GOP is limited in where they can win, and so are Democrats. The thing about this Senate map is that, as I mentioned previously, there are not as many swing states as previous elections, including this exact map just 6 years ago. You see, looking at our Senate map from 2016, we had other states that were competitive that are no longer competitive in this circumstance or even in our normal type of prediction. For instance, the state of Missouri was decided by just 3 points, in fact, less than that in 2016 on the Senate level. The state of Indiana, Todd Young won by less than 10 percentage points when Trump was winning by 19. States such as Illinois had a Republican incumbent. This was actually a pickup by Democrats. Not necessarily super competitive, but definitely a state that was on the radar for the GOP then, that doesn't seem to be and shouldn't be on the radar for the GOP in 2022. Looking at the state of Kentucky, Rand Paul actually severely underperformed Donald Trump in the state of Kentucky. You can see here that Rand Paul, who didn't even win by over 15 percentage points, whereas on the presidential level, Donald Trump was winning in Kentucky by nearly 30 points, 29.8%, and here was Rand Paul just winning by about 15 points. So there was a significant reduction in support on the Kentucky Senate level, a significant amount of voters who said, I'm all for Trump, but here I am voting for the Democrat Jim Gray across the state of Kentucky. Quite an interesting thing to think about. But of course, the Democrats still ended up losing the race, but it was never really meant to be super close, or at least closer than the presidential level. And chances are this one won't be closer than where it was in the 2020 presidential election. Rand Paul is probably going to do very well in the state of Kentucky, especially under this type of circumstance. So seeing that, the previous larger amount of swing states, or at least more expansive group of swing states. You also counteract that with the now introduction of Georgia and Arizona into the competitive column, and that makes a bit of sense. But beyond that, you really aren't seeing much change, and the map definitely is more competitive in other types of elections. In 2018, you had North Dakota, Montana, Indiana, West Virginia as toss-ups, right? In 2020, you had Democrats spending tens of millions, potentially hundreds of millions of dollars in states such as South Carolina and Kansas and Montana again and Alaska, even though they had no real reason doing so in hindsight. Of course, hindsight is 2020, and it is much easier to tell, but at that point in time, when you had clearly more competitive races like North Carolina, like Maine, states of that nature, the Democratic Party definitely should have been spending more money there than they actually did. But maybe overconfidence got to them. Maybe just the excessive amount of fundraising made them think it was not needed to be done. But Democrats now know, with this very narrow majority and Kyrsten Sinema and Joe Manchin holding everything up for their sake, that everything does matter. Now, for this to actually become a scenario, Republicans would need to have some pretty solid victories, meaning they would need to win the states that they previously won in past elections over the past 10 years by significant amounts. This is not child's play. You're not going to see Arizona go into the tilt column for the GOP because Kari Lake, is bringing down Republicans down the ballot because, the Mark Brnovich or whoever Donald Trump chooses to be the Republican nominee in Arizona is not doing well as a Senate candidate there. Even if the environment in Arizona isn't pro-Republican, the national environment, I think, is enough to overcome much. And I think that voters in Arizona are going to be in a position where they are more likely to back a Republican candidate if Republicans are soaring high nationwide and Joe Biden is skyrocketing or plummeting, not skyrocketing, plummeting from his approval rating. I think it's definitely something to consider. As for the state of Nevada, we are in a state where Republicans have had strong victories in the past. Red wave years have been very good for the GOP in the state of Nevada. Democrats do hold on to a good amount of them, but this isn't to say that 2022 is going to be like a race with Harry Reid, right? Catherine Cortez Masto, while going to be an incumbent, doesn't mean she's automatically going to win re-election. Nevada might have a blue history, but with this red type of tsunami circumstance, that blue history can be easily overcome, as Donald Trump proved with the Rust Belt in the 2016 presidential election. Moving over into a bunch of the other states, I'm going to characterize the state of Illinois as likely Dem, and I'm going to characterize the state of Maryland as safe Dem. Florida would have to move over into the potentially safe column. I mean, it is difficult to see how Florida could be safe. I don't really think that is something that is going to happen in 2022, even in this environment. Marco Rubio is probably going to do very well. Probably going to win 12, 13 points, but I'm not imagining a 15-point plus margin of victory in the state of Florida. It's something that I've had a bit of trouble trying to really finalize about in terms of Marco Rubio's outreach and expansiveness across the state. I mean, Marco Rubio is definitely liked more than other Republicans amongst minority voters, amongst the general populace electorate. That's why he was outrunning Donald Trump by 7 points in the 2016 Senate elections. I mean, you can literally see here that on the same ballot, Trump won by 1 in Florida, Marco Rubio won by 7.7%. So some significant advancements there for Marco Rubio, but I'm not sure if I'm going to be comfortable characterizing it as safe. At the end of the day, it still is Florida, and Florida, surprisingly enough, has been very resistant to both blue and red wave years in years past. The state of Georgia, of course, would be likely red. The state of North Carolina, I think, would also remain there. I mean, some states are still inherently swing states, and it's very difficult to see them break out of their shell, even if a national environment is completely lopsided in one way or another. The state of Wisconsin and Pennsylvania would also be states that would move into the likely column. I mean, these are states the GOP would be able to win by pretty solid amounts and would be expanding upon their victories in both 2010 and 2016 in these two Senate races. They did win the state of Pennsylvania back in 2004, but that Senator Arlen Specter actually switched political parties, giving Democrats a 60-seat advantage in the United States Senate for a very brief period of time. So the state of Pennsylvania, while did have a Democrat as recently as 2011, was not elected as a Democrat. So this individual Senate seat actually would be held out for the GOP for, I think, 2 decades, potentially 3. Moving beyond, you have other states such as New York that really aren't going to budge. Connecticut is not going to budge. We've seen the electoral history there. Richard Blumenthal is going to be very solid for re-election. In the state of Vermont, you have the current sitting House of Representatives member now wanting to become a United States Senator. He's going to get it, and he's going to get it by a large amount. The state of New Hampshire, the thing is, I do think it is a state where the GOP could see some type of major advancement across the state. It wouldn't take a Chris Sununu in this circumstance. It could be a standard Republican. It would just be the national environment carrying them across the finish line. And what you might have noticed is that there is not a single lean Republican state, but it's not going to stay that way. The state of Colorado will move over into the lean column simply because I do not have enough confidence in the state of Colorado to be a likely GOP state. It has just been so difficult for the Republican Party to win in the state of Colorado for quite some time now, and seeing it even red does make me a little uneasy because I rarely ever think of Colorado now as a state that is truly in contention. The thing about Jared Polis as the governor there, he is immensely popular, which means when I revert to my other map, the governor's map, Colorado still isn't that competitive. On the Senate level, who do you have? You have Michael Bennet, who was elected in 2016, I believe. He was winning by about 6 points across the state. We can go ahead and check in the state. He was actually the incumbent, but he won by 5.7%. I rounded up to 6%. He outperformed Hillary Clinton, her margin of victory, by 4.9%. But then in 2020, Colorado went to Joe Biden by a margin of 13.5%, which is why I keep this in the lean column. Looking at all the other states that I've characterized as likely red, all of them were less than 10-point victories, or victories for Trump, less than 10-point victories for Biden, or victories for Trump in the 2020 election. Nevada was 2.4, Arizona was 0.3, Georgia was 0.2, Florida was 3.3 for Trump, North Carolina was 1.4 for Trump, I believe, Pennsylvania was 1.2 for Biden, Wisconsin was 0.6, New Hampshire was 7.7% for Biden. So the victories there were not nearly as large as they were for Joe Biden in the state of Colorado, but it's not out of the realm of possibility that the Republican Party does win Colorado. In this map, they would flip 5 Senate seats. They would flip Nevada, Arizona, Colorado, Georgia, and New Hampshire in a sweeping defeat to the Democratic Party, a sweeping defeat across the country. Can't say that this is a map that I expect to occur in 2022, but if the national environment begins to deteriorate again for the Democratic Party, because right now it looks like Biden and the Democrats are plateauing at where they are right now on the generic ballot, where Biden is in terms terms of the approval, if they begin to plummet from where they are now to get to an even worse position, this map could become a very serious possibility. I mean, a 55 to 45 majority is very hard to envision for either political party, but it would give the Republicans enough leeway that they could lose votes such as Susan Collins or Lisa Murkowski or Mitt Romney on some very important votes and still pass things with a comfortable majority. They wouldn't need Kamala Harris to break any type of tie, and Democrats wouldn't be back to the 50-50 power splitting agreement. The GOP would have full and total control over the United States Senate. So under this map, the GOP would be benefiting immensely. While the state of Colorado is narrow, they have nothing to worry about on the GOP stand front, seeing all of the remaining toss-up states, or previously toss-up states, as likely red. The GOP does benefit immensely from this brand new Senate map put forth, and while it isn't the likeliest outcome, it isn't something that we can immediately write off as an impossibility, which is why this video was even made in the first place. The Democrats could be in for a defeat as large as this if they continue to remain in the position they are right now and dip just a little bit, but I don't expect that to happen. I do think Democrats will begin to rebound or at least somewhat recover in terms of approval and generic ballot performance, but if they do not, we could start to see Senate maps and Senate predictions that become a lot more similar to this one than the map that we are used to today. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. Make sure to comment down suggestions below, subscribe on the left if you haven't already, and check out the Instagram and Twitter. At the bottom left of the screen, there's also a Discord server for you to go ahead and join. On the screen, there's a video you can watch, and then a playlist for my 2022 Senate election analysis videos. Again, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you all later today.